Hey everybody, this is On coming to you with this month's Connecting Codes video. And yeah, it's a little dark in here. I'm having to film in the video in the vehicle again. It's very hard, this time of year to balance all of that because I have limited time inside. So I've kind of shifted to at least I don't have to have a background picture on it. And at least my head won't be disappearing and going in and out. But you can kind of see behind me, this is the inside of my vehicle. I actually have some cloth back here and just these are little lights actually that are right up here. Um, they're kind of fun in summertime because when I do have the doors open, um, in the vehicle here. It's actually kind of nice that I can even film in here at all. I have the room to stretch out, but um, they're actually, when they get the sunlight on them, then it provides like little night lights in here at night, which is kind of fun if I want to do something in the vehicle at night and just kind of chill and meditate with kind of a dim light. So it's almost kind of like a little solar light without the damaging effects of solar lights. And, and just exciting because I know a lot of people are kind of curious sometimes, about this lifestyle. This kind of blocks out and it kind of helps with both heat and coolness in the vehicle, having the cloth background in here. So it's actually giving me a little bit of a backdrop. I figured that out after the last video. And then I have a lot of wood in here, which is really nice, both for health reasons. It clears out the lungs, it balances. I have some energetic things set up in here to balance my energy out, um, to heal the physical body while I'm resting in here. And so it looks a little haphazard, probably when you're seeing it in this video, but it's actually kind of cool in here. It's, people say, oh, you got like a little gypsy van. um, but anyways, we're gonna get going, even though this is gonna be hitting right on top of my head up here. So, you know, maybe one of them will light up and it'll be like a bright idea over my head. But I want to get through this because my computer won't hold out very long here on the battery. So I've got a lot of information to cover in this month's video, and this is the insights for August 2024. And I want you to keep in mind that, by the way, if you want to check out all of the insights, and I'm just going to shift this a little bit so you can see it. Here's my book, The Code Journey. And this is the 2024 edition. I'm about ready to release 2025 on August 17th. And so I put out that huge book. It's about 700 pages every year, and it will give you all kinds of amazing insights. So what I draw on, I actually wrote like about a year and a half, well, over a year ago, almost a year and a half ago. And so these are things that I have an ability to tune in to the natural energetic influences, interpret them, understand them. I feel like this is a divine gift that I've been given in many ways. It's just a gift I have to be able to see how things are going to interact. It's not going to give me, you know, Trump's going to have an assassination attempt on, such and such a day. It doesn't do that type of thing, but I can pick up the currents. And actually, I did a little write up on my social media, if you want to check it out, about that, the day it happens. So you can take a look and it'll show some of the influences that were present and how some of these codes end up connecting. Because it is interesting. Matter of fact, I just had somebody who had never seen my work before. I sent him out a book, and friend of a friend, so to say. And he just recently wrote me, and he goes like, "Are you a time traveler?" And I go, "Well, maybe in some sort of way I am, but not officially, but yeah, I guess in some aspects I really am," because he says it's just so accurate all the time. My website, by the way, compassioncodes.com. If you go to the goods tab, select the code journey. I have 2025 getting released August 17th. Um, so the information's not up there yet. It won't be up until that time, but you can just click and those links will get you directly to the purchase pages, by the way. And the ebook is discounted. Previous versions of the ebook are free online, so you can always check those out and see if you like the content before going to paperback. I love the paperback personally. I like to work with it. It's easier because it is so much information than trying to deal with it. But I have people that like both. I have people that, um, for whatever reason, can't have the paperback, and so they go with the ebook version. And it's each person's preference in there. But let me get going on this because I got to get things done before the battery dies on the computer. And again, there's a lot of information to cover. So in our monthly insights for August 2024, what we have going on, what we can expect to see coming up. More diseases coming through, more attacks happening to healthy food, basic resources, people having a hard time processing things that are happening. And there could also be some health breakthroughs, but they could be AI connected, for example. So when we talk about this, we can expect there to be more narratives coming out, more warnings put out of food recalls going on. We could see more water contamination. We've had that recently coming up. We could hear more about where they're programming things into the water, which we know that they've been doing for a while. We could get word of more diseases breaking out. They're still trying to use that as a fear tactic with people. And yet it's also a reality because when you have borders that are wide open, you have people immigrating in from a lot of other countries. And this is not, everybody. I'm not saying everybody who immigrates in is got poor health. But unfortunately, in a lot of the countries where people are coming in from, they do not always have good physical conditions, and they are carrying a lot of diseases, especially if these are people that are coming in from some of the prison systems, some of the health systems, and things like that, and they're being released over. Then, yeah, they're going to bring in diseases from those countries that they may not think a lot about, but it's happening. So we need to be alert on that. That always warns us, take extra care of your health, boost your nutrients, get your rest, get out into the daylight, all of those great things. So we can expect more stuff coming up on that. And again, those who want to control the food supply, what are they going to do? They're going to put out that there's these recalls. Well, research it. Don't just naturally assume things. Um, they're probably going to attack the most healthy food sources, right? We're going to see continued attacks on things like eggs and cattle and different things like that. And some people say, well, cattle's not that, healthy. Well, there's pros and cons and everything. Again, there's certain nutrients that work well, but again, we might even see it coming up in fish. We might see it coming up in other things. Again, think of your most healthiest food sources and you want to find your alternatives. Again, always look for your alternatives that you can do in there. Chia seeds, for example, is one of my alternatives because I don't really have to rely on anybody for that. I can order it, I can get an organic version of it. It will see me through any hard times, even though it's, not maybe always the optimum thing um, for years on end, but it will get me through. And it is one of the only vegan or vegetarian sources. And I apologize for the glare in my glasses. There's just not much I can do about it. But it's one of the only vegan or vegetarian sources that is a complete protein. There's very few vegetarian sources of protein that are complete proteins, which you get in the animal products in there. So just some things to keep in mind in there. We're going to see people as more truth is coming out, as more of this stuff is coming through the system, and they're hearing about these things being contaminated. They're hearing about things, diseases coming up. It's going to be hard for people to be processing this stuff, especially if they have not been, if they've been believing narratives or things like that along the way. If they've been believing that, then it's going to be hard for them to process some of this. But we might also see some things coming through that are going to be presented as, look at this great medical breakthrough. Now, our people who have their limbs blown off in war can have this technology. We can just implant a chip in their brain. And, there's things I like about Elon, but I don't really like the brain chips. I understand that for some people that has value. It doesn't work for me. But they're going to be selling probably more of this AI technology for health, for better life, for well-being. And, again, we could go into multiple layers and I don't have the time to do it. of how that actually um, comes into play um, with a whole variety of things. I mean, eh, when you look at it in a biblical or divine aspect, no, God doesn't intend for us to suffer. But sometimes these things that we go through in life, um, even if we could have something that would be more convenient or make a better quality of life in some ways, um, isn't always the best because sometimes we're meant to go through that process, through that challenge, through that experience without the convenience and to find our way through it because there may be something that we're working through that has a bigger karmic impact, so to say, on it. Which is really important to do. So just making that comment, you know, that each person has to choose for themselves, and I will stand up for the right for people to be able to have their choices. Whether I agree with them or not, I will still stand up for the right for them to have that choice because that is more important along the way. But I do say use some caution because some of these things that are going to be presented as for your health are not going to be for your health and they're not going to be for your well-being and they're not going to be for your betterment. We're also going to be seeing in the monthly influences of August 2024 probably some job losses coming up. We're going to be seeing people pushed out of their jobs. So, here again, we could be seeing, and we've already seen this happening for several months, but we're going to have it probably come out more in the news of people being pushed out for illegals. So, illegals getting jobs, and they're going to claim, look at the jobs we've created. Well, they haven't created jobs. We've actually lost American jobs, not created jobs. When you create jobs for illegals or you put illegals in jobs that already exist, you're not creating any jobs. You are just putting illegals in jobs and you're pushing Americans out, which means you're depleting the American economy in there. Um, and you know this is going to be an important thing because it's going to make it harder for people to meet their basic needs. The thing to keep in mind with this is it's going to be challenging for a little bit while we're going through this, but it's going to be a temporary thing. So keep that in the back of your head. If you experience any of these challenges or you know people that are going through them, just remind them, hey, this is a temporary thing and it's not going to last forever. And it is actually part of restructuring towards the soul's path. So there's really some blessings in disguise with this. Again, we may not see those blessings in the moment. We may not understand them as we're going through them. They may feel like crap when we're going through them. But in the long run, um, this is part of a bigger restructuring, a divine restructuring that's going on in the world. And ultimately they're not going to get away with this because ultimately those immigrants, the illegals in particular, are going to ship out, and all of these jobs are going to open up, and we're going to see this improvement again. So just hang in there through it is the key thing. We're going to see a release of excesses going on, and people walking away from um, letting they're going to be letting go of status, money, um, people that rob us of having a life. So we're going to see more people getting back to a value-based life during this time, which is really exciting. I always get excited about that because that's a space where we're not in deprivation, we're not in total poverty, we're just simplifying things and we're just choosing to focus on things of value instead of focusing on material status, fame, fortune, keeping up with the Joneses, all of that thing. And the good thing about that is because it also awakens people up and makes them more disillusioned with celebrities, with people in positions of power. They end up losing their status, they end up losing their appeal. And that's a really good thing when we talk about that in benefits for the world, for humanity, for life on this earth. So being able to release those excesses, and people are going to realize, look, I don't need actually all of these excesses. And that is also going to take power away from those elite corrupt structures that we deal with in the world. and they're going to have more of a desire for adventure. So what we may see is we may actually see an increase in the travel industry, in the lodging industry during this time, or even camping, because if people are looking for a more cost-effective way, they may go to camping instead. And this leads people to consider additional options in their life. Well, it brings them into an appreciation. It brings them into looking at free things. Okay, so we're not going to do this extravagant thing, or maybe we'll let go of the boat, but we can still go have a picnic on the beach or different things like that. So I think that it's going to open up their creativity. It's going to stimulate their divine connection. So I'm very in favor of that. Now, from the 1st through the 22nd, we're going to there's going to be an increase or a movement to value-based living, which is what I was kind of just talking about. So that's going to get magnified during that time. People are going to focus on the basics. What do I need? What are, my food, my gas, getting to and from work? These basic things are going to become the priority. And so what is happening in this is we're getting an awakening from materialism, which is so great. It's so great because this benefits our world so much, and people become much more abundant, and their life becomes more fulfilling, and we see more happiness come up in people because they're focusing on things of value. It's awesome when this happens, and they're awakening from the materialistic illusions and the programs, again, that you've got to have this, or you're not worthy enough, or you're not good enough in society. No, it's going to come back to these family values. It's going to come back to spending time with friendships and communications, and appreciating the daily things in life, and seeing the magnificence of our world, as opposed to just striving for things all the time. So this awakening from materialism and materialistic illusions is going to be a powerful and beautiful piece during this time. And we will still see corruption um, trying to hold us in those illusions, because when we're in those illusions, it separates us from God or spirit, and it makes it easier to manipulate us. If we're separated from God or spirit, then we can be manipulated a lot easier. This is why they always try to sell these conveniences, try to promote what separates us from spirit as status, as the popular thing to have, as the thing that you need, when you don't really need it. Right? Ultimately, what do we need? We only need God or divine source. That's the only thing we really need. We only need what's within us. We don't need all of this extra stuff. All the extra stuff is comfortable and fun and all of that. But, the more absorbed we are into the material illusions and the materialistic lifestyle and the status and chasing all of that stuff, the easier we can be manipulated. So, it's going to try to hold us in that illusion. We just want to keep breaking out of it. We need to have faith that we can, with God, have basic needs met. Okay? Trust that. And if we simplify, most of the time, all of those needs are going to be met. We can simplify a lot of times and just clear out some of the excess and still live a very good, comfortable life. Um, a lot of people have just gotten used to living excessively. Even if they're not living fancy, they may still be living excessively, right? And so we might see some reduction in, like, the restaurant industry, because people are going to be looking for those ways. Well, if we cook and we do a barbecue at home instead of eating out, that makes a difference, spending $50 compared to $200 type of thing, when you weigh it over a family, right? So that sort of um, aspect in there, where people will take a look at that. Um, and when we realize those basic needs will be met, part of what we're going to see is, again, corruption is going to try to control um, that, and it's going to try to destroy our ability to do that. When I say that, um, it's going to try to control our ability to meet our needs. So we're going to have to be on guard for that. We're going to have to be standing up to that. Again, this is going to drive us more in some ways towards a self-sufficiency or a simplifying aspect, and we'll see more people move in that direction, and we'll see more people standing up to that, because when you start to control people's basic needs, and when they try to destroy our ability to meet our basic needs, Well, now you're running into things that um, people are not going to stand up for. It's gonna wake a lot of people up, and again, a lot of people are gonna say, "You know what? Maybe I don't need this. Maybe I don't need that." And it's going to change the perspective, and again, it's gonna remove some of their power. So we do have to be on guard for it, though, because they are going to try to attack those basic things. So what are our basic things? It's our food, it's our gas, it's our ability to work, all of the earn a living. So again, the jobs being attacked again. Those are all things that help us meet our basic needs in there. Now, this can also lead a shift. We've already started to see this shift happening. It can also lead to more shift where people are going to say, you know what, we need to downsize. So we may be starting to see more shifts happening in the housing market. And a lot of people like to start thinking about putting houses on the market. Now, that may not happen in August, but they may start the steps to that as part of their simplifying of things because September is oftentimes a big month in the real estate market for people. We need to be careful of those that appear really charming as well during this time. So again, this is the first 3 weeks of the month um, because they are oftentimes selling us into things that are for their own personal gain. Um, and it could take some time to see the truth about these people. So don't work out of urgency. Don't work out of fear. Be on guard to that. If somebody's trying to sell you into something, they're trying to get you into the moment to act without thinking. Don't do it. Take your time, think about it, research it, all of that. That's another one of these tactics of corruption or people living in materialism. We need to, we're being encouraged during this time to work with others in groups. We're starting to see this more and more where people are saying we've got to lay aside our differences. I've been seeing it for a couple of months. We need to work with each other in groups, joining our skills, joining our wisdom, and doing this to help our community and people and to uphold our rights and to remove the governmental control. Government doesn't need control over every aspect of our life, okay? That is not necessary. We need to have that choice, and the more we turn that control over, the more we enter into a dictatorial society, and we're really pretty much already there. Um, you know, we don't need to be controlled. Just because we might want something to happen, we might want everybody to live our way. That doesn't work for everybody. Everybody doesn't have to live the way that we want to live or that we are living. Okay, we don't get to impose what we want onto other people. So we really want to be careful of that. And if we come together and we start looking at it and saying, look, hey, we really got to connect with people. And maybe I don't like some of these people's political views over here, but man, they sure know a lot about the forest and they know a lot about gardening and they know a lot about plants and they know a lot about these different components. And I want to draw on those resources. I want to learn from them because that's going to benefit me. That's going to benefit our community, things like that. So coming together and we're going to see during this time, I think, more of grassroots movements going on. It's a great time that supports grassroots movements in August. So take a look for that and maybe even initiate some. Again, initiate it. Just say, hey, anybody who is interested in this, do it. You can keep the politics out of it, and then let's blend our different expertise together and see what we come up with. That's where we're going to keep ourselves out of trouble. Um, we're probably going to see a big turnover during this time in world leaders due to protest for rights and freedom. So again, they try to suffocate those rights. People are going to rebel. That's going to force people to resign. It's going to force a turnover. We're probably going to see a turnover, overturning of agencies and governments to clear out tyrants and dictatorial structures. So people are really hitting that precipice. They're like, we're done. We're not putting you in. We're not going to allow this. We're not going to do that. And I don't think that we're going to see a lot of violence or anything like that so much. Um, but we are definitely going to see this overturning happening. And we're definitely going to see these shifts happening. And that's going to be very interesting to watch to see how they shift over. People will continue to seek ways to be off grid and self sufficient. So, again, they're going to also be really supporting. The support is going to go to those leaders who are supporting the people, who are working for the people, who are teaching people to be self-sufficient, right? These are about equal opportunities. People don't have to take those opportunities, but it's about allowing everybody to have them. And we really do. These are inalienable, inalienable birthrights that we have, um, in the world. And so, um, getting down to this where people have the opportunities to develop their skills. They have the opportunities to do things. They're not forced into it. They don't have to. They're not having their profession selected for them. They get to choose these things. And so we're going to see the support going to people or going to leaders and influential people who are taking care of the people, who are teaching them how to be self-sufficient, saying, look, we don't need these regulations. You just need to understand your land. You just need to understand how to grow your food. You just, need to understand these different things. You need to learn to take care of yourself. And we're not going to necessarily give you a free ride in the world when you don't need it. But we'll give you all the opportunities so that you can take care of yourself. So it's about stopping some of that enabling process and supporting people and coming into their strength, which ultimately makes strong communities. It makes it makes a strong world. It makes strong countries when people can do that. The stronger the people are individually, the more self-sufficient they are individually, and it's part of what America was founded on, is the self-sufficient component, the stronger that country becomes. And it really is part of where America has always had its strength from, um, was based in those principles. It wasn't based in control. Matter of fact, a lot of America was based on stepping out of the control, stepping out of mm, these components that support total control over life. Because once you do that, you're just a slave. You're operating in a structure that is very detrimental to pretty much everything and everyone. Um, and it pulls us away from God. You can go on and on and on in that list of things. Okay, so as we get into the last week of the month of August, from the 23rd on, what we're seeing in the energy currents is, um, again, this continued move towards self-sufficiency. So that's actually going to be big all month. Um, we have to be careful of that because there's a lot of narratives out there, right? The climate narratives and things like that that are not truly about self-sufficiency. Now, I will give hats off to one of the guys that does the tiny house movement. He was very big in that. He's based over in Australia, and I apologize, I cannot remember his name or his YouTube channel at the moment. Um, Bryce, that's his first name, is Bryce. And he actually just came out and took a great stand. He put a great little video out about the shift he's making in the tiny house movement, because he was mentioning how it was originally about creating affordable housing for people, not in these programmed ways, but in finding ways for people to be more self-sufficient, in finding ways to live simpler, to giving people options, because the housing market had gotten so out of hand. And he said, he even did like the direction that things were going, um, where people were getting so elaborate and they were no longer really tiny houses, and they were getting into being, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Whereas when he first started the movement, the whole point was to, be able to put a house together for under $20,000, for example, or, to reach the people who had so little to work with. And he's now going back to those roots, which is really cool, going back to these basic options, these foundational options that are still working in harmony with the environment, but not under the aspect of the narratives, and going back into that cost effective thing. This is what self-sufficiency is about. So we may see more of these eco communities, and I'm very split with them. I'll tell you, because I know some people that are involved in them, and they're doing some really great things with them, and they're really doing the true harmony and the true restoration of the earth. And then there's other people that are doing them that are just doing them based on all the narratives, and implementing things that are actually damaging and not helpful to the environment. So we have to be careful when we see these eco villages pop up, when you need to research it more and understand the people behind it and understand their philosophies, because like anything, it's going to be mixed, and that can also be used to push. So we have to be careful of those things that come up appearing to make us self-sufficient that aren't really about self-sufficiency. That are really connected to the other narratives. So um, I think we'll see, and again, this time favors more things like community gardens, personal gardens being done. The community gardens, we have a beautiful one here where I am. They do a lot of work on it. And yes, there's a lot of people involved in things that maybe we don't share the same political views on things. However, they've got a lot of wealth and a lot of wisdom, and they are benefiting our community tremendously by upholding these natural spaces and by upholding um, we've got like a pollinator garden here. That's a big thing that's coming in, helping our bees, helping our butterflies, because again, that is a huge part of our ecosystem that is critical to all of life, to animals surviving, to humans surviving, to all of these things. So again, we want to look at that, but we've got to be careful because there are going to be attempts to use this as a way to control people. So we've got to filter it out. I believe if we get more local, get into those groups, again, look at people's different expertise. Let's share, let's combine, let's work with things, because, even though I don't have a background in some of these things, I might be able to warn people, for example, hey, we're going to have weather patterns coming in. We could have heavy rains. We could have unexpected storms showing up. We could have these different things. So do you really want to plant? That may adjust how you plant, when you plant, what you plant. Um, so I still have an expertise to bring to the table, even though I don't have their knowledge and background. And in the meantime, I can learn more about their stuff, which is going to help me out. So there's all these mixtures of things that we can do. We will see more attempts to control people, and the more people um, the more that people are being controlled or there are attempts to control it, the more we're going to see people exit the system. So again, while we don't like to see that happening on the good side, it does bring people back to where they need to be. It brings them back to that self-sufficiency. So in some ways I look at it and I go, okay, go ahead, try it. I don't think it's going to work well. It's going to backfire. I know it's going to backfire on you to try to control people, but you know, and again, we could see it with the food scares, right? Because like food and things like that, we know that's in the monthly influences. So that's probably what they're going to do. Oh, we have a scarcity of food, so now we've got to ration this. That's a way that they can control people through these different things. Well, that's not true. We have an abundance of food out there. There's always an abundance of food. It really isn't an issue. Um, there's always things that can be done. I mean, if you look at some of these primitive African cultures that are out there, they know how to grow food in, very harsh conditions. They know how to survive. They know how to make it in there. So we could see some of those scares come up, but I think it's really going to backfire. I think they're really going to get called out on it. So what we will probably end up seeing as a result, even if they attempt that, is more decentralizing and the value of decentralizing things. So that's going to be really great. So we're going to see things coming back more to the local levels, to our local cities, our local communities, our local towns, our local states, and getting back into that. And I think that that is actually a really good thing. Again, even if I don't like some of the people in charge, I think we're going to be seeing some of those turnovers coming. So I'm not too worried about it. But um, I think it is important because what my state, the state of Maine, needs is not the same as what, say, New Mexico or Arizona needs, or even California needs. In California, what Northern California needs is not what Southern California needs. They're totally different terrains. They're totally different environments and, things to work with. people need different things in different areas. These blanket laws, these blanket regulations do not work. They do, it's not we don't, people, it's not a one size world, one size fits all world here. It doesn't work. That will never work. People have different needs, different things that are appropriate for them, different things that work for the people in those areas. The mindsets are very different in different places. I've traveled all around the country. I haven't traveled all around the world, but I've traveled all around the country. And what you need in these different areas is different. What are important to people in different areas? You have to look at that. So I think we're going to see more of this decentralizing and coming down to the smaller scales. And that is actually going to make, again, people stronger and more self-sufficient. And that's going to be really good. And the strongest communities, by the way, are the ones that have the least governmental control. And this is part of why I'm always coming back to people saying, look, get back out there and look at your own community. Look at what's happening in your own world. Focus on what's going on there. Because the stronger we can make our communities, the stronger we can make our towns, the stronger we can work with each other like neighbors. I remember when neighbors worked together. We didn't wait for the government to police our neighborhoods. We policed our own neighborhoods. We had community watch programs where neighbors looked out for each other. You knew what was appropriate and what wasn't appropriate to be happening on land. You paid attention and you knew who your neighbors were. A lot of people don't even really know their neighbors these days unless you're in some of the more rural areas of things. So this is very, very important. And we forget that sometimes because a lot of people try to look for that easy way out. Well, just let the government dictate everything. No. Every time we turn something over to the government to dictate, we weaken our communities. So we really want to stay on top of that. And we don't want them to do that. I see things happening in my community and I'm like, oh, people are taking payoffs. They're taking payoffs from the state. It's, um, the state's trying to buy people here. Our government leader, Collins, she's trying to drop money into our community here in Bethel. And then that's really about buying people. That's not because she actually cares about the community. That's because the community virtue signaled enough to be able to get the resources. They phrase things in certain ways. They're doing certain things to support the narratives. And as a result of that, they're getting funding that nobody else is getting. Well, I'm glad that certain things are thriving in our community on the one hand, but on the other hand, we're selling our soul and we're weakening our community. And that's not going to be a good thing in the long run for us. And I think that will shift and change over time, but it is something for us to stay aware of. Again, don't wait for the government to do it. Join with people, create a group, and do it. You don't need to wait for the government to do anything. In most cases, just do it. And there are always ways. And if the idea is great and it really supports the community, people are going to support it. Okay. Also in this last week of the month, storms. Storms could increase. They could come out of nowhere. They could be worse than expected. So you really want to think about that, especially if you're going to be like out on trails or things like that. Could there be HARP stuff in there? Maybe, maybe not. But I think the bigger piece of this, I'm less concerned about that in this situation at this time. But what we are going to see and what could be connected to that is an increase in tornadoes, versus any other thing. Weather condition is an increase in tornadoes. So we could see tornadoes even up in my area where we don't normally have tornadoes. That's not something we normally deal with here. We've had one or two smaller ones pass through, but I think that is something that we could definitely see more of coming in all across the country during that time. And they will use that to support their climate narratives. And we want to keep in mind, this is not because of global warming. It's not because of that. But we will, unfortunately, probably see some really strong devastation from them. and that is going to create physical and financial challenges for people. And this can be part of where we see health issues coming into play, where there actually could be genuine health concerns coming into play, is because those tornadoes and the storms and the water rains and things like that that come with the tornadoes and the winds and things like that could create some issues in water and dirt, which could lead to health issues. So we might need to think about boiling water before we use it. We might have certain things that could get issued out. And again, they'll probably try to jump on that to capitalize it and say, oh, well, it's all been contaminated, so you can't eat anything from here. You can't drink anything from here. Here's our government food. You need to eat and drink that. Well, don't forget, you can still have things shipped in, so you could, order food up. Um, there are a variety of things that could happen. If you're canning, preserving things ahead of time, if keep some things already on stock so that you don't have to worry about and you're covered for a couple of weeks or a month, while things clear up again. You want to keep plenty of water and food on hand for that. And so the other thing is you don't want to take chances. This is not the time to be storm chasing. This is not the time to be out on those really remote trails. I mean, you can hold off a week, right? You don't have to go during that particular week. Take the trails where you can get to safety easily. Know what your safety areas are. Know how you can protect yourself if that is to come up and if that is to happen. Matter of fact, one of my favorite walking areas, they will get hit with that type of stuff. Usually, if that comes through or the strong winds come up, we've seen the tornadoes and they come right through here. Again, not that we deal with a lot, but we might have high winds in one place, but this seems to be a pathway for them. So it's something that I'm going to have to think about in that last week of August to say, yeah, maybe I don't want to hang out in this particular spot a whole lot. uh, During that week. I need to find some other alternatives or to do some other things, and just be a couple of half a mile down the road instead, um, where I can have some stronger protection if need be. So paying attention to that, we need to use our power really wisely, and we're going to find out who is and is not using power wisely during this time, because the people who are going to see some really strong windfalls, some really strong successes come through, and the people who are not are going to take some really hard falls. And the good side of that, again, is because when you're dealing with dictators or tyrants or things like that, if they're misusing their power, and they're abusing people, then they are going to take falls. And that's always a good thing, right? Get rid of that dictator energy in there. Flush that out. Let's get it replaced with something beneficial where people are using their power wisely to help people strengthen themselves, strengthen their communities, um, that are supporting clean air, clean water, clean food. There are people that talk about that, but that's not what they're doing. And there's people that people believe are not doing that, and they are doing that. They are supporting that. So it's time to take another look at that and to really, really pay attention to that. But we will know based on what's happening for people whether they are or are not using their power. And if we're experiencing a windfall or a hard fall, then that's going to help us understand where we are and are not using our power wisely. So it's something to stay on top of. One place that I particularly see that there may be issues coming up is in casinos. Now, that leads me to believe we particularly need to be careful of, um, again, casinos, could they be hit by tornadoes? Yeah, we could see that combination of these influences come in, and casinos could be a particular target in that way. But um, when we talk about using these powers, because part of this using power wisely or unwisely has to do when we're using it unwisely, we're gambling. It connects to gambling energy. And that gambling energy is using resources that we can't afford to lose and and spending them in hopes that we're going to get some big windfall that's going to bail us out of the situation that we put ourselves into, like alleviating all of our debt, which we got into because we were living beyond our means in things. So casinos, I think, actually are going to come into highlight and focus during this last week, particularly where this is happening. We could see casinos go out of business during this time. Um, and again, where people are gambling with resources they can't afford to lose, we could see incidents come up in casinos where people hit their breaking point because they lose money that they couldn't afford to lose. And, people are not being realistic in things. So it ends up leading to greater danger in multiple ways. So this is again a thing. I think casinos are going to be a highlight. Where do we have casinos? We have casinos in Atlantic City. We have casinos, I think, in some other parts of the East Coast. We've got a lot of casinos, obviously, in Vegas. We've got a lot of casinos in desert areas, and actually a lot of the middle part of the United States. We have a lot of casinos come up. They have these little small casinos and strip malls and things like that. I've seen them when I've traveled. I mean, they're like in mini marts. They're in, they're all over the place. And there, I'm glad that we don't have much of that here in Maine. But um, in the top part of the Northeast, we don't have a lot of that. But that could definitely affect a lot of different things. And again, that plays in with that materialism energy and financial losses and things like that. So we could even see casinos going bankrupt in this time. There's a variety of ways based on the influences that we have that we could see playing out in this situation. We're also going to see competitions increase. And this was one of the things that was present, that we have present actually in our around the world energy codes from this time through November 15th. And this was part of what played into the attempted assassination on Trump, is this competition energy. And the competition energy gets really nasty. It's real nasty during this time. And that really gets increased, and that leads people to taking more extreme measures like attempted assassinations. I mean, that's just an example of it in there. And it comes from people being insecure and corrupt, seeking recognition, seeking status, fame, fortune, or trying to protect those things. And so the competition is always about proving you're better than another. And what happens is sometimes when you get to that point where you really can't prove that you're better than another, you just try to alleviate the other person. And that's what we saw in Trump's situation in there. So, and it always comes down to, like, in our around the world influences. So this is kind of magnifying some of that. It comes down to um, attacking those people who are not being compliant in things. So and that's because they're strong people. So the people who are in this competitive energy, seeking this fame, this fortune, this recognition um, happening, they want to beat the strongest, or who they perceive as the strongest, and that's the non-compliant. In there. So that's part of that. But in this, what we need to do is we need to know our own value and worth. And if we know our own value and worth, we don't have a need to um, compete. And so we really want to be conscious to stay out of the competitions with people, to not be in that space with them. Do something because you love it. There's nothing to prove. It's not about, having to be the best. It's about embracing skills and assets and enjoying and loving what you do and having fun with what you do, and not doing it to prove anything to anybody. Of course, the corrupt uh, people that are working in dark energy, um, they always have a need to prove something, and you know because they don't know their value and worth. They are not operating in that light. They're not operating in um, the beneficial components or aspects of who they are. They're not operating in their divine spark, their God energy. They're operating in material world darkness, so to say. So we want to remember that God does not need to compete, and we don't need to either. God doesn't compete with anybody. What is not of God competes with God, but God doesn't compete with others. So if we keep that principle and that concept in mind, we don't need to either. If we're going to stand in our God or our divine energy, or with divine source, we don't need to compete with anybody because we have skills, they have skills. Maybe we can bring those skills together and do something, do a collaborative effort, who knows? But we don't need to be in the competition. It serves nobody. And matter of fact, it shows us who is insecure, who is not confident in things, who is um, not standing in the light. It's a good indicator a lot of times in there. Okay, we are going to see actually a beautiful piece that we'll be seeing this month will be the emergence of kindness or generosity coming up. This people wanting to help each other. I just had an incident where I helped somebody out yesterday. It was a very small thing, but they were just blown away. The counter girl was blown away, and the person I was helping was blown away. I mean, it was like a $2.50 cup of coffee that I paid for somebody because just they thought they had money they didn't have. It wasn't like this person was trying to scam or get away with anything. You could tell they were embarrassed over the whole situation. And I'm like, really, it's fine. I'm happy to pay for it. It's not a big deal. Please take it because obviously they needed that. I could tell they were tired. Maybe there was a long drive that they had ahead of them. I don't know exactly the details, but I could tell they were there getting that because they needed it. They obviously looked a little worn down, but well kept enough that I knew, it wasn't like they couldn't afford it. They just got caught without all the cash or ability to pay for it in the moment. And, but these small acts of kindness lead to bigger patterns of kindness, and we set bigger energy patterns in motion when we do that. And I think we're going to see the emergence of this, especially where people, animals, the earth are struggling. Um, People want humanity to thrive. They want animals cared for. They want the planet cared for. These are all basic components that people want. And where they see the struggling happening, we're going to see this beautiful piece in the last week. And in the storm areas, I think particularly, right, if we have tornadoes come through and there's big storm damage where people are hurt by things that they have no control over, like in those types of situation, or like the families where the one person was shot defending, at that attempted assassination with Trump, where the one person was shot and he was protecting his wife and daughter. And people have just outpoured for that. So that's the type of thing that I think we're going to see. It's those people who are truly in need. What is truly in need? And I think in some of those disaster areas, we're going to see a lot of kindness and generosity pouring out to the people in those areas. But we have to be, again, very careful of those green agendas, um, which will also likely surface at this time. So when I say that, it's because they're playing on people's desire to help and do the right thing and to support the earth and things like that. But they don't. So we really have to be careful of that because they may try to infiltrate in to just play on people's sympathy, to play on their empathy, to play on their desire to do good things. And, um, you know, and then take advantage of them from that. So there you have it with that. Moving on into our action energy. Okay, this is um, what actions might we see really being implemented, or what actions do we need to take? And this is going to range for the entire month. So one of the focuses that we may see or that we want to have is this balancing of extremes happening. I think a lot of people are tired of the extremes. They don't want it. They're saying, look, the only way that we're going to get through this is if we find some sort of balance, if we can honor what's important to each person in there, and that will also help to do it. I find this is an important thing. when we honor and we take a look and say, well, what is really important? What are these people really being extreme about? Well, okay, the super high extreme people, first of all, we want to realize they're probably being paid. The ones that you see all over social media, they're doing it because they're getting paid for that. They have sponsors that are paying them to be dramatic. They're getting paid by, some of these people are paid by our own government to promote these narratives in crazy, extreme, dramatic ways. So all of a sudden, everybody's basically an actor or an actress, is what we see in there. Um, but the people who have genuine concerns, most of them are not sitting in the extremes. Some of them are still in the extremes a little bit, for whatever reason, whether they're believing lies, narratives, whatever it is they're believing, that could be part of it in there. But what we want to get down to is say, well, what's really important? Okay, so what the real importance is that these people want to see the environment taken care of. They want to see clean air. They want to um, find things that are the least damaging. But we also have to balance that with what will actually meet the needs of people. And again, yes, we need to self-moderate to a certain extent. Some people say, well, people will never self-moderate until they're dictated to. It's like, well, if they're dictated to, you're just going to lead them to want to be more extreme and more excessive because you throw people into deprivation and then, when they feel deprived, they're going to be seeking more and more and more. And so those are not going to be favorable patterns. Instead we want to shift that. And so if we look at the values and we say, okay, how do we balance taking care of the environment with meeting the needs of society and sustaining appropriate life for people, whether that is through, you know, um, getting to work, being reasonable about things, having to travel for your business, so you need a car that's going to work more than a few miles, or, I mean, you can't be within a small radius. There's all kinds of ways that we can start to look at this. And I think what we're going to see is more common sense, more practical approaches, more responsible approaches coming in. And actually maybe some real genuine solutions being offered up, which would be absolutely great. Absolutely great to see that. Um, and we can honor our polar opposites or the polar opposite uh, components in loving ways. So we can care about health and well being of ourselves and others. It doesn't have to be just caring about others or just caring about ourselves. Um, and we can do things in positive ways. We don't have to be in these extreme ways. Almost anything that we pull out there is probably connected to a narrative in one way or another, if we really get down to it, right? Um, but we can do these in positive ways, and we can come up with real solutions. And this comes back to, if we are joining together in groups with people of different wisdom and skills and backgrounds, and we're focusing on the concern and not the political points and the political ways of doing things, then we will actually tap into the real solutions, uh, um, and be able to integrate the differences into what's needed. So we can sit there, it's like having, how do I say, it's like having two kids, and one kid wants to go to the beach and one kid wants to go to the mountains. Well, maybe you find a beach that has pine trees like we have in the East Coast. And so you get both the beach and pine trees and the mountains. Or, you go and you find, okay, well, maybe we can't integrate the beach, but what if we found, some waterfalls and some cool water elements like that we could, play in, um, and have fun in the mountains? Or what if we split it up and we do half of the trip in the mountains and half of the trip on the beach? There's all kinds of ways to meet the needs of both. It doesn't have to be just one thing. along there, and maybe multiple aspects and dynamics are the true solution in there, because then you don't burden any one resource when doing things. If we look at these different components, maybe there's a play. Okay, well, if we can draw on the elements to help create some energy, wouldn't that be beautiful? But until we can, find a way that those alternative sources are not also damaging the environment worse than extracting the oil, for example, or until we can get them to where they're truly reliable and can support the full needs of things, we really can't give up the other in there. So we have to look at things from this balance, from this practical, from this not all or nothing attitude. And what happens is people are fall into these fears of the narratives, and then they get panicked and they say, no, we have to implement something right now, without ever really looking into things and understanding the true impacts of things. I remember doing the research a couple of years back. Well, it's probably been 4 years now, 4 or 5 years now, and doing the research on, you know, oil. And there actually are aspects of it that there's a huge abundance of it. It's not in the deprivation that people want it to make out to be. And it actually does not have the environmental impact that a lot of environmentalists or these narratives have put out. And part of why are they shutting that down? Because it's actually provides greater self-sufficiency in a lot of ways, um, than some other options. And here again, we got to weigh it out. You could even say, well, but if you do solar, it gets you off grid. Well, let me jump back actually to the wells for a moment. And actually, what I found out with that was it wasn't the extracting of oil that was the problem. It was the drilling of new oil wells, um, that is there. And you can drill and bring the oil up and not have a high environmental impact. You can actually have a very low environmental impact in doing that. Um, but if you're putting in a whole bunch of new wells, that's a different story in there. And most of it, we can be very abundant with what we already have in place without having to do new wells. So, like, for example, when Trump was in office, he wasn't drilling a bunch of new wells. Obama did that when he was in office. He drilled a whole ton of new wells, but nobody heard about that because that's not what the news wanted to portray his image as. And that was part of what I found out in the research. So it was actually Obama that was doing the damage and not Trump in there. These are things that people don't hear about. People didn't hear about all the environmental um, planting of trees and things like that that Trump did. I know I did a post on it probably 4 or 5 years ago, in social media, and people were like, "What? Trump's about the environment?" Um, it was like, "What? What do you mean Obama did more harm to the environment and Trump was helping it?" That was not what people were ready to hear and things. And again, I try to look at people's actions. It's not about this person, that party for me. It's about what are people doing, and focus on those things. So, again, and then we can look at something, say like solar or wind or something like that, and say, well, if you do this, you get off grid. Well, first of all, your wind towers and things like that actually require oil. So they're not totally, like an off-grid option, and they're completely controllable. Those resources are still controllable. And people say, well, I can get my own personal solar panels and then I'm off grid. Right, but then you've got to balance that out with the highly toxic environmental aspects and impact that those solar panels create, not to mention the extreme cost, which becomes unaffordable to most people and then puts them completely controlled into the system. So there's always these different components we have to think about, all of the things that have to be mined and dug into, and the child labor and the slave labor and everything that goes into making those solar panels does not necessarily make it a great option. If you want to be truly self-sufficient, go look up the things where people have power and they're generating it because they're riding a bicycle or in a walking wheel that they've integrated into their house and their house's design. Um, Now they're truly off grid, and they're not having a high environmental impact. And they're keeping themselves healthy at the same time because they're exercising to create the power to power their house, and they're not reliant on anything, and they're not digging into the earth, and they're not, so there are ways to do it, but do people want to commit to the exercise to have their electricity? Well, that's something to think about. That depends on what your values and your priorities are, and there. I'm not saying we all need to do that, or is that reasonable for powering a company, or something that's bigger scale that we need in the world, so to say. So definitely just some different things first to keep in mind with this integrating our differences. When we consider the true concerns, we can break down the extremes. That's the point of this. If we can consider those true concerns that people have, then we can actually start to address the issues in favorable ways. Um, we need to feel inspired to do things in positive ways. And the more people are speaking up and finding ways to express themselves, this is going to be a good time. This is going to be a good time for people to speak up. So it's going to be a good time for people to speak up at those town meetings, at the school board meetings, at different things like that. People are going to be more open to listening. It's a time where we actually can work with people with different views because they're going to be more open to hearing what's being said and hearing the different viewpoints and hearing an individual's perspective as opposed to just what is being pushed on us through whatever channels, whether you're talking truth or community, regular news, alternative news. They're all pushing certain narratives and theories and things like that because you see them because there's a lot of money put behind them. Take the time to stop and listen to some individual people. I'm going to a thing tomorrow that is filled with incredibly wise people. One person who did a huge symposium a year or two ago on regenerative farming, and they are a freedom movement um, in my state, not right where I am, but in another part of the state. And I'm going to go and connect with them. And I think it's going to be great because these people have incredible ideas and they're working from this balanced, practical, reasonable space. Like I said, they care about the environment, but they care about freedom and they don't want the regulations. And, they're finding that balance and they're helping people say, look, if we get off of the chemicals, it might take 2 or 3 years to restore the soil completely. But when we do this regenerative farming and not just farming and growing crops, we nurture the environment, we nurture the earth, we increase our food supply, and we actually end up with more food supply than using the chemicals, you're using these other things. And the wisdom is amazing to learn and experience. And they're very up on the narratives and how do we work with and um, to balance out what is being pushed on us. And so, again, these great things. Be willing to speak up if you've got something to speak up to, and be willing to listen to those people that you've never heard of because they might have a really good idea. They just don't have people throwing money behind them and putting them out in everybody's faces. Um, Look in your local area to some of these groups, like what I'm going into. See if there's a freedom rally going on, or see if there's, people with these wisdom. We have a lot of incredibly wise people who are actually pretty well known around the whole country or even world. Brandon Straka's out here in Maine, and Christine Northrup's out here in Maine, and I know there's a couple of other big ones out here that are going to be part of things that are here right here in Maine, right here in my own backyard. It's pretty incredible. So I'm looking forward to those connections. People are learning about how to put their own ideas in motion right now. And I think this is a big key. This comes back to focus on the communities, focus on some of these smaller groups, because you can actually have a pretty strong impact, even if you're a small group. And you will inspire other people through doing that. When you do these things, you will inspire other people to do these things in their communities. And again, this is where communities become strong and their communities can say, hey, I saw this happening over in Maine, and these people are doing this. And what if we do this here, but we can adapt it to fit our needs here in the desert in Arizona, New Mexico, wherever, um, and adjust it accordingly. And just using those foundations, you never know what kind of creativity could be triggered through those actions. We do have to be very careful of false prophets, teachers, gurus, spiritual leaders, all of that. We're going to be seeing them get exposed, and we're going to be seeing the corruption using these people to try to influence us. We already see it, right? They use pastors to influence us in a certain direction. They use prominent spiritual people to influence us in certain directions. So we need to make sure that the people that we are listening to, um, or that we're following, are walking their talk. That they're not just putting these narratives out there, that it's not just like, oh, there's so much that goes around in the truther community. I've become so disillusioned with it. I'm sorry if that offends some people, but it's just the way it is. They just they've lost it for me, honestly. They it's not, it's really about money and power as much as the corruption is, and they're really not operating in a clear way. And then same thing with the spiritual community. I've become so disillusioned with it because they have gotten to a point where a lot of these leaders, I found out, they're not walking their talk. So again, you may want to go to the people that are less known, um, because they might have some of the strongest ideas and the strongest selections in there. So we'll probably see more of those getting exposed here in August 2024, which is going to be good. I'm all for that. Expose the Deepak Chopras, expose these connections, expose these people who have been misleading people for a long time. And it's not just him. It's there's a lot of people out there, and some of them are transitioning. Some of them are saying, "Hey, I'm really going to walk my talk now," and they're changing. We have to be open to the ones that are changing in there. And great if they will take their power and their influence and use it to actually help and to support people in moving in the right direction. Great, I'm all for that. Um, and people do change, and I've changed. People change. I know it happens. You take one stance at one point, not knowing, and then you take another stance at another point. So these are all, you know, different things for us to consider and just keep our eyes on. But I think we do have exposure coming to that. We are called to work in, again, groups and on teams with each other. Team up with people to pair up to do certain things. It can even be a small thing. I mean, it can even just be a small thing like, hey, we're going to get a half a dozen people together and we're all going to go out, and every Wednesday or, one time this week, we're all going to do a pay it forward, or, we're all going to just do some act of kindness, or we're going to pick somebody in our community and we're all going to go help them take care of their yard, or whatever it is. We're going to look and say, there's some elderly people in the community and we're just going to go help them out with a project. Or, I mean, it can just let your creativity go. Imagine a little bit. There's so much that can be done. Or you can just say, we're going to have, there was a group recently. I went to an event of theirs. I think it was about a month ago, or 2 or 3 weeks ago, maybe. And it was a group of people who formed and got together uh, when the pandemic hit and they weren't allowed to go into churches because they didn't want to follow the narratives of wearing masks and things like that. And so they were people that wanted to uphold the aspects of freedom but still wanted to worship God. So they started their own worship group. And every once in a while, they open um, everything up, and they did an event in one of our parks, and they just opened it up and cooked, burgers and hot dogs, and everybody kind of potlucked stuff in and just opened it up to anybody who wanted to come and have a meal and do praise songs. And so there's things like that that we can do too, where you can just say, hey, let's all get together and we will just, uh, put together enough food to feed, what, 250 people or whatever the number is for you, or even 50 or 60 people, depending on your community. And we will just put together enough food, and we will just make it a free food event for people, and anybody can show up and have that. And it gives back to the community. So there's so many ways that we can work with people that doesn't require a lot of people, and we can still have these big impacts. And another part of working with people, again, is to expand our skills and sharing our gifts. as times get tough, you don't want to be caught not knowing how to do things. Some basic things like planting things, like wild foraging, like, different things. So if we're working with other people, maybe you go work in a community garden so you understand certain things that need to be done in a garden so that you can have your own garden. Again, sharing these different skills, and that brings up questions, because when people don't know things, they ask questions, and those questions lead to other things, and you never know what doors those are going to open. So the success comes from focusing on the experience, and that's really what we want to focus on. It's not just about, hey, accomplishing a certain result. It's about the experience we're creating. So like if you open up and you say, okay, we're going to bring together enough food to feed 250 people. There are going to be a ton of us. So, if we bear that, that's not a huge cost. Well, if we're doing burgers and things like that, whatever we're doing, simple meals, um, beans and franks, whatever it is, the community suppers do the same type of thing. There's no big burden on one person. And it's about creating an experience for people. It's not, we've got to feed 250 people and that's our, it's fine to have some goals and stuff like that, but you don't want that to be your main focus. Your main focus is, we want to bring people together in the community. We want to just open something up and give. We just want to have people be able to come and relax for a little bit and let their kids play and have some interactions with each other, and really focus on the experience and just have a positive experience in things. And so, not just being on that task or those results. And I think that that's something else that we'll see open up more in our world as well in here. Okay. Also in our actions, power plays. Now that's going to come back into the more intense world event stuff, right? Power plays among world leaders. Um, we're going to see greater calls for people to resign, um, because people are going to be trying, these dictators, they don't want to give up their positions. So we're going to see bigger plays for control, for power. Again, this was part of Trump's attempted assassination that went on, is because they figured if they could break the hearts of all of Trump's followers, then they would have control over those people. It would devastate them. They'd be able to gain control. Well, we know that wouldn't happen, but at the same time, that's what some of this comes back into, is the more they try to control, the more people are going to call for them to resign, the more that's going to come out, the more that's going to get exposed on them, and the corruption will be exposed. So we're going to continue seeing this exposure come up, and it's going to be exposed again by the inner circle. So what does that mean? That means that people are getting impatient, that are operating in corruption and that are operating in these devious ways. And they're going to start vying. If they see an opening, like, for example, they're starting to push Biden out of the picture where they can. And you've got all these people that are now starting to compete for that position, for that placement, for that increase in standing and status in their corrupt circles. And so they're looking for these things. You have younger generations that are taking over, right? You've got Soros's son is taking over more and more for George Soros because of his age and, medical issues or whatever else he's dealing with. How much longer does he really have? And so we're seeing more power and control come up through those channels. But it's going to get exposed. And I think some of these younger ones that are starting to take things over are going to also expose stuff, because they're a lot more careless in things and they're a lot more power hungry. And so when we see this competition, because remember, we have that competition energy as well going on, when that combines with this need for power and control, they're going to be trying to outdo each other, and they're going to be trying to take each other out. So they're going to actually turn on each other. I think we're going to see some corruption turn on corruption. They're going to be throwing each other under the bus in order to get their higher standing in their corrupt circles. But we want to focus on removing government and corporate control. We're going to see a focus on that. We're going to see, again, these grassroots movements coming up saying, Yeah, we're not going to take this anymore. You guys don't get to be in charge of this. You don't get to control this anymore. And we're going to see more and more power and control taken away from the people who are thriving on power and control. Um, and people are going to stand up and they're going to take their power back during this time, which is going to be really beautiful. Now, that can lead to obviously some hardships. That can lead to some hard things to um, see and to watch because, yes, that can be protest. And depending on who's protesting, that could be peaceful or that could be violent. It depends on the group. It depends on whether people are the paid protesters or whether they're sincere people with a cause that they're focusing on. There's a very big difference in there as far as the results that come about and what happens in there. But I think we are going to see that. And it is a time where we're going to see um, people demanding resignations. I mean, we're already seeing that, like with the Secret Service person that was in charge of, this whole detail for Trump and everything, and the mistakes that were made there. And people are like, we're calling for resignation now. Right now, we want to see resignation. They've been subpoenaed to testify on things. So investigations are being started. I mean, people are they're not willing to put up with it anymore. They're tired. Again, they're tired of these extremes. They're tired of these games. And that we're going to see some really strong advancements for those that are who are in divine alignment. So if you see somebody making, huge progressions, we want to take a look at that. And instead of judging them and saying, well, I don't like that person, there's something else at play. We want to understand, well, where are they in divine alignment? Maybe there's something I'm not seeing in that person. Um, but that also brings in this assassination energy. So I think what we saw in Trump is not the first. It's not the last. I mean, it's not the last. It's not going to be the only one. I think there's going to be a lot more attempts coming. I don't think it's going to be just on him. It's going to be on anybody who is trying to stand up to the corruption, who is trying to stand up to the evils in the world, who are not complying with what the dictators and the central banks and these people want, um, who are overthrowing these people who have been in power and control and trying to dictate and rule under tyranny and these extreme measures. And so we're going to see the backlash because when people who are in divine alignment make big progression, um, so if Trump got a huge boost in his support, they're going to backlash on him because they're losing power and influence. And they're going to try to make more attempts there. Um, People like Melania, not Melania, the girl, the woman that's running Italy right now, Melania, something close to that. And I know I'm not getting the name right, so I apologize. But people like her, President Milei in Argentina, these people who have been making some really big strides that are benefiting people, um, they're going to come under attack. It wouldn't surprise me if, like Nigel Farage over in the UK, or some of the UK leaders that are trying to rise up now, um, come under attack. So I think this assassination energy, and again, this can come anywhere from just verbal assassination, verbal discrediting of people, silencing of people, different things like that, to physical attempts. But I think because of this addition of power and control that's in place, because of these other components of needing to prove valued, of needing to prove themselves, of seeking attention, of wanting to, again, rise up in the ranks of the corruption, I think that we will see more physical assassination attempts going on. So this is really going to probably leave some people very on edge, very unsettled, very concerned about things. But again, that can still lead us in positive directions because it's going to make people rethink, again, their excesses, where they need to simplify things, coming back into what's needed, what the basics are in things. Um, and, you know, this is all about a retaliation for losing power, for the corruption, losing power and things. And those attacks, they're going to attack those that are bringing down the corruption again. We're also going to see the military get more active again. So maybe this is that hot summer that we've heard a lot about in different groups and circles. The military is going to become active. And again, they could be either way because we know we have two dynamics in the military. We have the military that are against the people, and we have the military that stand with the people. So that's going to come up. We're going to see particularly the Navy become active. And what makes me think we might see a focus on, again, the Taiwan region where China's surrounded, aspects of Taiwan, and Russia. And again, we need to kind of separate. There's some aspects that are separate from Russia and Putin, not always one and the same. But Russia, they've both been doing things in the water, in the oceans. And because water is one of the elements that is activated right now, let's say, I think we're going to see more naval movement, more military action, more military plays for power through ocean areas coming in. And, I mentioned that 2 months, I think, ago, a month or two ago, when we were dealing with the past coming to the present. And of course, what this does is usually the ocean areas are going to hit more of the UK, the EU, and those regions around there. I don't think it's going to be just in those areas, but certainly we're gonna see more of those regions come into play. So think about that, and I think that probably the Taiwan and Russia and China all becoming a little bit active at those points is because they've already set up areas that they've got things waiting to be activated in that are in the ocean areas. So that's why I mentioned those. Okay, I got to keep moving here. Our energy on our thoughts from the 1st through the 5th, so this is just those first few days of August, we're going to have some good news coming forward. So that's actually going to provide a little hope and inspiration. Again, we're probably going to see it get rougher towards the end of the month, but at those first few days, at least, we're going to get some hope. We're going to get some inspiration, some good news coming in where power is being used wisely. We hear a lot of this, again, of the woman over in Italy that's running things. She's just shutting down. She's, shutting down the chemtrail stuff. She's shutting down the GMOs. She's shutting down, things that are contaminating the food sources. She's taking some pretty big, incredible actions that are going on. And we're probably going to hear some more positive results coming out of an area like that or where people are doing things like that. We're going to see more of a shift towards that abundance mindset. So again, stepping away, not so much about the materialism, but this abundance mindset of caring about humanity, of coming together for common causes that benefit animals and people and the earth. And there's going to be a sense that things will be okay. People are going to have that feeling like, okay, we're seeing some challenges, but things are going to be okay. And they're going to be learning, we're going to be learning more about how to create successes. So I think we are going to see again, more of this common sense solutions coming up of here's how we can genuinely be successful, not just successful with narratives, but and what people who are not working for humanity want to do, but being genuinely successful and benefiting and truly benefiting those in need, truly benefiting, again, the planet, our humanity and animals in the world, and truly benefiting the world. So I think that's going to be a very optimistic time. People are not going to be as stressed during that time because of that. Again, they're going to be able to ease up a little bit, which will be good. Now, the 6th through the 15th, what we see during that time is we want to make sure that we're staying focused on our successes and not the hardships. Because when we do that, it helps us to get through the hardships that we have to face. and the successes are part of a bigger transformation. So I recommend this a lot in my work when I'm working with clients. Look, you focus on the successes that you're having, acknowledge them, take the time to celebrate them, because even the small ones that, hey, I got up today. I got up when I needed to and got these videos cut. That's a success. Celebrate that, because they lead to bigger successes. And that is very important to consider and very important to look at in there. Um, so we want to focus on those and not the hardships. It is the way through the hardships, because when we recognize our successes, it gives us the energy and the motivation to face those hardships that we have to go through. And we don't want to get into that defeatist victim mindset, which naturally comes up if we focus on the hardships. We want to think practically and focus on being responsible. We've got to stop doing things in these spectacular ways. Right now, what is needed is common sense, practical, responsible options, not going off on all these tangents, not spinning our wheels on things without having them fully looked at and considering all the components in them, which a lot of these green narratives do. They're really not about the environment. They're about controlling people. And, you know, people just are in this panic, like, we've got to implement this because we're out of time. Well, that's not true. And so they're willing to take irresponsible and do irresponsible things, um, in the name of their fear. And if we're not operating in fear, we will be more responsible and we will take more practical action. And people are going to get behind that. Even if they don't get everything that they want during that time, they're going to get behind what is practical, reasonable, and responsible action. Yeah, we don't need to send or spend money on all of these excessive things that don't truly benefit humanity and people and animals and the world, the planet, the earth. Um, we don't need to spend excess money on that. What we need to focus on is we need to focus on providing for people in our communities. We don't need to spend all of this excess money on illegal aliens who are coming in destroying the country. We need to focus on those people who are homeless in our own communities, things like that. So I think this is what people are going to get behind. What's practical, what's responsible. They can give up some of the things that they would like to have, as long as the needs are being taken care of, as long as the obligations and the responsibilities are being met. And the good thing about this is we could also see more people bringing people into accountability. People want accountability for these actions that the corruption is taking. Um, and when we meet our responsibilities and obligations, we bring a natural soul connection. And when that soul connection happens, we connect with God. When we connect with God, we bless what we're doing. And so we have an easier time, so to say, meeting what needs to be met in there. We bring God into the situation. And when we bring God into the situation, then we open up all kinds of opportunities and blessings for ourselves, individually and collectively around the world. This is about learning to meet what needs to be done through the soul self as well. So we have things that we may need to do. We may need to buckle up and, just do the work that needs to be done, face the things that need to be faced, but we can face them through the soul self. And if we do that, we will get through it. Again, that's like facing the hardships. So don't avoid them, face them, but face them through the successful mindset, through the abundance mindset, through letting God flow into the situation. Now, focus on working from unconditional love and seeking peaceful paths. So, if our mindset is on unconditional love, we are going to find the peaceful paths. In other words, we don't have to go to war. We don't have to be in battle with things. And those who are focused on unconditional love, who truly care about humanity, who are truly focused on abundance, are not going to take us into war. Okay? The only way we end up in war is because people are focused on their own greed, control, manipulation, lying to us, deceiving us. and pushing us into that direction because they don't really care about us, the environment, or life at all. Now, from the 15th through the 29th, it's going to be a time of ebb and flow. So we need to be, or I guess that's probably the 16th through the 29th. It's an ebb and flow time. So we need to be a little more flexible with things. We need to be able to ride with things in the moment. We need to be able to be in flow. There's going to be times that things aren't going to be moving. There's going to be times that they're going to be moving really fast. So we need to be ready to take action when action needs to be taken. And then we need to be comfortable resting when there's no action to be taken. It's a great time for us to observe things and to look at things from multiple perspectives. So again, the person who's taking in multiple perspectives on things, looking at things from many sides and not just one side, is going to be bringing forth some of those great solutions. And strong leaders will observe what's happening so that they know what to do. So, if you have security detail, right, they're going to observe somebody carrying a ladder into a place, um, and climbing up on a roof. And they're going to observe that and they're going to realize, hey, that's not really normal in these conditions. And I know that I need to stop that person from going and using that ladder and climbing up on things, or I need to go question them. Um, you know, uh, your true leaders, even in military, even in war and these things, they don't just react to something. They really observe things because when they observe things, they can take wise action. They can understand what needs to be done. They're not so influenced by this urgency or this fear, which means they're thinking with a clear head. And we want to do the same, and we want to support those leaders who are doing the same thing, and see the leaders who are doing that. Okay, it doesn't mean that they're not taking the situation seriously. It means that they don't want to waste their actions, and that they want to make sure that things are being done in a way that is effective and appropriate and will actually take care of things, instead of putting us in a worse situation. That's like you don't react and then end up in a war. Okay, you actually observe things and you say, well, okay, maybe if we, do this or do that, or maybe we can strike a deal here and then we can avoid the war. So these are the types of things that we'll see in this component. Observe, observe, observe. So when those rest times we observe, then that allows us to know when to take action and to be able to take the best action that is needed. We need to learn how to, again, work with others without turning our power over to them. So we can definitely do that if we know our value and our worth. We won't turn our power over to people, but we can still work with them. We can still, again, come back to what needs to be addressed. And let's look at these different sides and these different components, and let's draw in the skills of different people. And I can draw in those skills of different people, but not turn my power over to them and give them total control over things. We each contribute those skills. And I think that's where some of the huge assets are going to be. Now, those that want power over us are not going to work with us. They just want to tell us what to do. So that's an indication. Those people who are just issuing out orders, they're not working with people. They don't care about people. They're not concerned with what happens to people. They're not concerned about life. They're not concerned about a solution. They're only concerned about power and control and influence and status and money. So we really want to pay attention. Who is working with us? Who is not working with us? We want to look towards those that are giving us freedom and offering us self-sufficiency. Because again, that's where we're going to thrive individually, as communities, as states, as countries, as the world. Those that increase the self-sufficiency and the ability to be self-sufficient, those are the people we need to be standing behind. Those are the people who are going to work with us. Those are going to be the people that are going to get our needs met. Those are going to be the people who can take care of things in practical, responsible, common sense ways without getting us into wars and battles. Okay? Those people who don't offer that, they're going to get us into battles and wars. So we want to watch and learn from those that are leading by example. Okay, don't just listen to the words. What are they doing? Who are the people who are showing you the way through their own actions, through the steps that they are taking? Now, one thing we do have to be careful of during this time is we could see an increase in depression in people. So, where we had that little optimism in the first few days in the month, we're now going to have people that may be falling into a depression, like they may go into some of that hopelessness, especially if they're in countries where there's strong dictatorships or strong rules like that, or where they feel like there isn't a lot of hope, or where they don't have command over their own life. They don't have that ability to be self-sufficient. Um, this is also going to come in people who feel lost with things, who feel rejected, if they're losing their income. Remember, we talked about that earlier. If they're having health challenges, so they're worried about taking care of their basic needs. People who are worried about that feel like their basic needs cannot be met, and they can't take care of themselves, are more prone to fall into the depressions. Now, we especially want to be careful of that if people are following a lot of narratives, because if they're falling into depression and they're in that state of mind and they're following a lot of narratives, those are the people that become used as the Ponzi's or the players to create the assassinations. They're the sacrificial people in society. So, our government may go and look to those people and say, oh, yeah, okay, this person has a history of mental issues. They're falling into a spiral. These things are going wrong in their life. Perfect. It doesn't matter if we lose them or not. And so we are going to come in and convince them to commit this crime or to commit this assassination or attempted assassination or things like that. And we can use them. And so we want to be very careful of that. And if we can, lift them up, because the people that are falling into those mindsets are really going to have a hard time. And again, we want to bring people back to the successes, remind them of the successes that will help to keep them out of the depressions. And then we want to use those hardships as opportunities to make change. So again, don't go into the defeatist um, deprivation mindset. What we want to do is to say, okay, we're facing some hardships. Let's face them. Let's get through them. And what can this allow us to change? What difference can we make as a result of this? And in doing that, that can really benefit us. So instead of seeing that as a wall or an obstacle or a block for us, and again, we want to look to the leaders. Who are the leaders that are saying, okay, this is a hardship, this is a challenge, this is tough, but what are our opportunities here? This will give us the opportunity to do something else. This will give us the opportunity to make a change. Now, of course, many people worry about that, right? Because they say, yeah, well, these hardships, that's the opportunity for the great reset. That's the opportunity for them to push central bank digital currency. That's the opportunity to make these things. Well, yes and no, but it's also the opportunity for us to make other changes. And so we have to, again, be able to say, well, what are our opportunities in these challenges? And then get behind the people who are leading the way through their actions to move away from the unfavorable opportunities to the favorable opportunities and things. So being alert to that. And then the last 2 days of the month, the 30th and the 31st, people again are going to be more open to options and ideas. So again, that's that time to speak out. If you can go to a meeting, a community place, you can voice your opinion on things, you can express yourself in a favorable and positive way. If you can use your own life experiences, that's going to be even more powerful with what you're sharing, and people are going to connect with that. And again, listening to people who are not just big names out there. Get in and listen to what some of those lesser known people, like myself, I don't have a huge following, but listening to these people, because they actually may have a stronger pulse on things, or they may actually be presenting more reasonable ideas that are beneficial. Um, a lot of mental warfare going down in this time. So that can come with creating confusion. That can come with, trying to create hopelessness in people, that can come in verbal um, abuses, or trying to discredit people or silence people or things like that. So a lot of this mental warfare, confusing people to try to pull and sway them under the power and control of people. And it is about that. It's for power and control, and it's attempts to make people think that they cannot make it on their own. So we're going to see a big push of that in the last couple of days. And that's all about, again, getting control and aspects of their life. Well, look, you can't even hold a job. You can't even feed yourself. You can't even, pay for your gas to work. And you just better turn everything over to us and let us handle it for you. And we'll tell you what to do, and we'll tell you what you can have and what you can't have. And, uh, you know, we got to be really, really careful of those, and we got to keep our mind clear. And again, if we're coming back to the successes, if we're coming back to the opportunities, we won't find ourselves falling into some of those aspects or components in there. Now, finally, getting to the soul cell. I told you we had a lot going on this month, a lot of active things coming into play. And of course, the soul self, when we look at this in regards to world events, the soul self is really about, where can we thrive? Where can we bring God into the situation? Where is that being challenged? Where are we being pulled into the whole materialism aspects and components versus what allows our soul to thrive in what's happening in our world. So these become important components. From the first through the fifth, what we're going to be seeing, and these can be components that nourish or try to break down the soul's energy, God's energy, divine source's energy in the world. Um, People are questioning obligations and responsibilities. And I think that this is a really good thing. And I think people need to do it. They need to always question, are we really obligated to do this? You see things like the pandemic that happened, and people didn't really question things. And that was very detrimental. And they didn't stop to say, well, I have these rights. Some people did, but a lot of people didn't. And really taking a hardcore look, what am I truly obligated to? What am I responsible to? And so when we look at this in world events, what that means is we're going to see a lot of things coming up around moral issues, moral obligations that we have um, arise, and people seeking greater alignment with that. Now, I know one of the political talking points or things that people are hanging on to with our Democratic Party has to do with the abortion issues. Well, that's a huge moral issue that's coming up and probably will be brought up in the month of August 2024. Um, and that's going to come down to really, where we being responsible or not. If you are committing an abortion, in some states what they want to do, or in some of what they're trying to push through, it would allow them to do the abortion after birth, which is actually a murder. It's not an abortion anymore. Um, that's not really morally and ethically um, great. And so we have to look at, where are the moral obligations and things. So we're going to probably see that might be an issue that comes up. It wouldn't surprise me at all. Um, and people looking at things saying, okay, yeah, you can do this technically, but morally, you have an obligation otherwise to not do that particular thing. So people are seeking a greater alignment, um, and they're looking to people who are operating in moral and ethical ways. Again, this may not always come out the way that we like it to come out. It may not always come out in the most pleasant sounding words, but it may still be the moral or the ethical thing to do. And again, sometimes, that means that probably the extremes on each side are not going to 100% get what they want, because a lot of times that moral and that ethical issue lies in the middle. If you say that Muslim and the Quran cannot be taught in schools, um, then it's very hard to say that it's okay to teach the Bible in schools. Our schools are meant to educate our children on math, on English, on writing. Um, they're not there to teach religion. Churches are for teaching religion. And so we really can't say this religion can be taught and this one can't in the school systems. Um, we have, again, you're going to run into all kinds of moral things. And why is this going to come up? It's really great for creating division between people. Anytime you bring morals and ethics, I mean, it's just like talking politics or religion. You're going to create a lot of division in people. So we're going to have to be on guard for that. Um, but some choices, again, we may not like them, but we simply have to do them from the soul self. It's kind of like I might, somebody may not like going to work. They may not even like the work that they do, but they've got a moral obligation to feed their family. And so they do it. But just because they don't do it, it's like these people working in a mini mart or something like that. They may not support everything there, but they can still do their job from the soul self. And that allows them to stand and meet their moral obligations in the process of doing something that they may not like to do. We may not like doing house chores, but we have a moral obligation to keep our household clean and healthy and comfortable and safe and things like that. But if we approach those chores through our soul self, they actually do not become so hard to do. So I think this is an aspect of we need to face the things that need to be faced. We need to take hold and do them and do what needs to be done, even if we don't like it, and then approach it with love in our hearts, approach it with God's energy and assistance. Okay. We're going to see also a lot of questioning the direction that we're going and if it is the true progression. And what we may find during this time is that everything that's been pushed as progression may not be progression. I believe that a lot about AI. There's a lot of AI that it provides a lot of conveniences, but it's not necessarily progression. And in many ways, it's regressed society. It's taken us away from being able to know our skills and embrace our skills. And we may need to look towards past or primitive ways for better solutions because they may offer better solutions. So, a lot of what we used in the past or what we consider primitive ways are actually much better solutions to doing things and offer greater self-sufficiency. When people had wells on their property, when they could draw from that and they didn't have anything that was supporting it. You didn't have people that came out and cleaned out tanks in your land and things like that. And we need to look back towards some of those processes and some of those solutions in order to move forward. So in a way, we're looking backwards to understand how to move forward. We're going to see a lot of rebel energy probably come up and provocations, people provoking us, trying to pull us out of spirit, out of the soul self, out of um, God's perspective or God's viewpoint on things. Um, and things may just feel, unfair, unjust. And if that happens, then people may have a tendency to react. And instead, we need to be on top of that. We need to say, okay, I'm being provoked. I feel rebellious. I feel myself reacting. And we need to read into the truth and the facts and to take action in legal and ethical ways. And that's always the key. You don't fight corruption with more corruption. You fight corruption with truth and lawfulness. You don't fight hate with more hate. Uh, you counteract it with love. And these are the paths that we're being asked to take. And that rebel energy just takes us into bad paths. It just spirals us into things that are not favorable. It pulls us out of the soul self, pulls us away from God. It pulls us in directions that aren't going to work. And we must let go of our perceptions of things. We must let go of the perceptions that are being pushed on us and the emotional charge around those to get to the fact. And then what we want to do is let our emotions inspire us to take the action and to be a source of motivation for us to do things in appropriate ways through the soul self, through what's right, through what's appropriate, through lawful ways, ethical ways. Again, those morals and those ethics play very, very heavily into things. So it's not the time to try to twist things, manipulate things. There's enough people doing that. And it's only those moral and ethical ways that are going to actually be able to truly succeed. From the 6th through the 29th, we're going to see a lot of stress surfacing in people. So a lot of stress, tension, worries, anxieties coming up. Excuse me. And this comes again. Remember, we have those first few days, which give us the hope and the optimism, but then we start to see people, you know, experiencing things that are hard for them to experience. The challenges, the things that they don't want to see, the attacks, the backlash coming out. And that will create a lot of the stress, the anxiety. And that's also going to come up where people feel that things are hopeless, where they feel very restricted, very overwhelmed, particularly by material and earthly things. And they're going to be forced to deal with things that they've been trying to avoid. Now, that can play out a couple of different ways, right? Because that can come out individually and then our communities where we have to face that things are happening. Like my community at some point is going to have to face the drug and the crime issues. I mean, we have very low crime compared to other areas, but we have to face what's happening here at some point because it is happening, and we have to face that it's coming from people who are not necessarily the deprived people, but like kids in our private academy here who are very wealthy. The families are wealthy. Um, it's not coming, you know, out of that. It's just coming out of boredom, maliciousness, whatever, um, power control games, different things like that, just because they can, because they believe they won't ever get caught. You know, people are going to have to face the fact that they're going to have to stand up for certain things, or the crimes are going to, we're going to keep seeing a catch and release component here, which we see. So we're going to have to be forced to deal with things. On the other good side of this is those who have been operating in corruption and forcing all of these things on this are also going to have to be, they're going to be forced into dealing with things that they've been avoiding. So where they've been trying to cover things up, where they've been trying to write things off as not important, they're going to have to face these things now. They're not going to be able to just get away with them. So that's going to be really a good side of that. It's going to be hard to deal with, but it's going to be a good side of it. And the key comes back to, again, is to simplify things and to take time to appreciate the daily things and to see their magnificence. Okay. We don't want to take anything for granted at this time. Um, Absolutely nothing. Take nothing for granted. Um, these are times, especially when you're dealing with that retaliation and that assassination energy. It's just like the guy that lost his life, you know, at the Trump rally when that happened, when they tried to assassinate Trump. You never know what's going to happen to people. You never know what's going to go down into life. It doesn't have to be your own careless action or somebody's own careless action. It could just be your time to go or somebody else's time to go. And so if we come back to operating in the soul self with people, whether we agree with them or don't agree with them, we have always given them something beautiful to remember. We have always taken the time to emphasize what has true value and true importance. And it's not all these things that we fight over. And it's not all of these things that we make a huge issue about in our world so much. These are the real things. These are the basic, simple things that we overlook every single day. And we may have experiences coming down during this time that make us stop and think about that. how much we take for granted. So I encourage you, you know, take the time before you walk away from your partner or your spouse or your children. Tell them you love them. When you come home at the end of the day, tell them you love them. When you put them to bed at night, tell them you love them. When you interact with people, even if you're having a rough day, be kind to somebody. It doesn't take much, but it changes things in a really big way on a bigger scale. Paying for that $2.50 coffee yesterday changed multiple lives in that one moment of doing it without any thought or worry or concern or aggravation or anything or obligation. Just doing it, being moved in the moment. Take the time to watch a sunset, a sunrise, to look at the world around you, not from all the politics, but from the beauty that it holds, and to experience that beauty. Take the time to be with family and friends. We have a lot of lies, deception, manipulation coming up during this time. And that's going to be used, and I'm sorry, my nose is starting to itch. And it's going to be used to pull people out of truth and integrity. So we really need to be on guard to that. And again, this can be connected probably to um, climate issues, environmental issues, but it can be connected to anything. It can be connected to the storm issues. It can be connected to anything um, that is out there. So we just need to be aware and alert on that. And these lies, this deception, this manipulation is really about separating people from God or divine source. Um, and it's illusions that are being brought down. So that's a time where we're going to see these illusions being brought down in the world, and the truth is going to be surfacing. But we have to remain in the truth. We have to be standing in it. We have to be vocalizing it. We have to be speaking up for it. And if we are residing in it, then the illusions can't exist. And again, it doesn't mean that everybody in the world has to do it. If you are the one person standing in truth and integrity, it will still be present and it will still bring light and expose the illusions that are present. And that's a pretty powerful thing. Corruption is going to pretty much expose itself. So we don't always even have to engage in it. We don't even oftentimes have to do anything other than standing in truth and integrity. If we are standing in that, it gives contrast and it allows people to see um, where things are not in truth and where they're not in integrity and where the illusions are and where the lies are and where the deception and the manipulation is happening. So that corruption naturally exposes itself if we're standing um, strong in God with divine source in the soul self. So again, if we're operating in that space, the rest exposes itself. And it's a time where people will see how they've been living in darkness and blind to it. So again, another big awakening time, right? And there's a lot of components we've talked about that play into people coming face to face with reality during this time and starting to recognize that, yeah, this actually is happening and we can't ignore it. We can't keep covering it. We can't hide it. And of course, anything that is tried to be covered up during this time will, um, be brought to the surface that much more to where we can't ignore it anymore. Um, it's the proverbial, the light is turned on so we can see things. But what we got to remember is we are the light. When we're standing in the truth and the integrity, we are the light. And so we are turning things on to where they can be seen. Our mere presence someplace allows things to be seen, and it is enough. So, um, yeah, when you're in that darkness, right? If you're in a dark room, it takes a while for your eyes to adjust, but eventually they adjust. But there's so much that you don't see, even when your eyes have adjusted. And you just become, numb to it. You don't think about it. But then when the light comes on, all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, I can see the dirt over there. I can see what needs to be cleaned. I can see the dust. I can see what a mess this is. I can see this. I can see that. And it's the same aspect. It just takes somebody turning on the light. And again, we are that light. So if we walk into the room, we've turned on the light if we're standing in the truth and the integrity, and we'll be able to see the mess. We'll be able to see the dirt and the mess and all the other things that we haven't been able to look at, that we haven't been looking at, and things. Now, finally, again, as we get to those last 2 days of the month, the victim patterns arise. Remember, we had that in the other aspect with the thoughts and the mental warfare going on. Well, the mental warfare is designed to create these victim patterns. And the victim patterns hit our soul self because that pulls us out of our soul self. They're not just a mindset, they're actually an attack on the soul, if you want to say that, in there. So when they use these attempts and these things to create us and put us in a victim pattern, then that is an attack of the soul, is what it's doing. And if we find ourselves in a victim pattern, then we are not residing in the soul self. And we need to take the time to pray, step away from things, go for a walk in the forest, walk on the beach, whatever our environments offer, um, and connect with the magnificence of the world, and get out of those victim patterns, because we are disconnected at that point, and we cannot really do anything from the victim pattern. It's really like disabling a vehicle. You're not going to go anywhere if it's disabled, and that's what the victim patterns do, is they disable us, because they disconnect us from spirit, divine source, God. And when that happens, we really can't go anywhere. We can't really do anything from it. And when those rise, people will believe that corruption's going to get away with things. So here again, this is part of the mental warfare. It's going to appear like corruption's getting away with things. It's going to appear like the bad guys are getting the progress, but they're not in that time frame. And we're going to see attempts to sabotage and victimize those people that are standing in the truth. So we got to be alert. But here again, if we're standing in the truth, all of those things are going to backfire. Every attempt to sabotage is going to backfire. So we want to make sure we're not buying into that belief, um, that, again, that we're powerless, or that the corruption is getting away with things, because it's not. It really isn't. We just got to stand strong. And people at this time, they're done with things. They're done with a lot of this negative energy, this corruption energy. Um, and so we're going to probably see with that coming attempts and part of this warfare going on, a lot of silencing, censoring, restrictions coming down. That is part of the attempts to sabotage. That is the methods for sabotage that we're likely to see during this time. And again, desperate attempts for control over those who can't be controlled. So again, this is about breaking the spirit, about breaking the soul. Very, very likely that these last couple of days could be a high point for, again, that assassination energy, the attempted assassination energy, the illusion of things, a lot of twisting, turning, distortions, um, narratives being put out there, not being able to find what gives you inspiration, not being able. So it's not just going to be political stuff, it's going to be anything that gives you hope and inspiration. We'll probably see things that, news about, when we talk about this, that break the spirit. What is that going to be about? Things happening to animals, things happening to the planet, things happening to people in misfortune. These are all mind games, and we got to remember that a lot of these pieces of information put out there are not the truth. When we get down to it, it's like they want to say, oh my God, the bubonic plague is here, and this is here, and that's here. There's only one case or two cases out of, hundreds of millions of people. This is not a huge concern. So we have to be careful of things being blown out of proportion that they are putting in our face, to to create this fear, to create these victim mindsets in there. And this, again, all comes back to desperate attempts for control over people that can't be controlled. We're going to see attempts to turn friends against each other, again, to pit people against each other and things. We've got to be careful of that. And those people who do turn against us, who give into the corruption, who give into the power and the control sources, most of them are probably doing it out of fear and for self-survival. So we got to kind of balance that and have a little compassion, even if we don't agree with it, and realize that, they've fallen into a space of fear. They've fallen into that victim energy. Um, and that's why they're doing what they're doing. It doesn't excuse their actions, but realizing that they're not necessarily doing it um, completely of their own free will, I guess is the way to put it in there. So having a little patience in there. But again, that does mean, okay, here's now another person that I can't trust. And we do have to put them in the untrustworthy space, or that space of where they no longer have my back. They no longer are with me. They no longer are standing up for what's right. Um, but the reality of it is we do need to stand up for what's right. We um, don't want to play the games. We've got to stay alert to the sabotage attempts, and we got to do what we can to protect truth and integrity. And that's the big thing. Um, we can't just be silenced. You know what? If they shut down an account that you have on social media, then you need to go out and you need to be present in the community. You need to go out and show up to your town meetings, your city council meetings, your school boards, your whatever, and you need to stand up for that truth and integrity in person. And those are all recorded, and they're not going to stop those recordings. And they will get out, and they can't block those recordings in there. So a lot of big, strong competition energy. Again, the competition is going to be more of a mental warfare, more psyop type of things going on, and it's really about trying to break up connections, partnerships, break the spirit. Um, but our true, strong relationships can't be broken, and interferences are going to be attempted, but they can't be broken. You think about this with like a love relationship, for example. If that love relationship, if the connection that they have is super strong, no temptation can break up that relationship. And the same thing is true. And again, we know this is going to backfire. So it's the same thing like trying to create interferences between, you know, uh, somebody who's battling corruption. Like, well, just take Trump. He's a perfect example. He's battling corruption in things, and you've got a bunch of followers there, and there will be attempts to interfere with that following base, to break their spirit, to do that. But every time they try to interfere with that, they're going to end up making his base stronger, and there's going to actually be more people that come on board, because the people who are truly strongly there supporting, it doesn't matter what side they're supporting, one side or the other. You have the same thing happening with Biden or the other party. The people who are the strong supporters are not going to stop supporting them, no matter what interferences you throw in their path. And this is a good eye-opening point, because it shows us who is with us and who isn't, who we can trust, who we can't trust. It's going to show a lot of things. And it shows us, again, where those true partnerships and connections are, because a true partnership and connection, and those who are truly standing for the truth and the integrity, they're not going to give in to the fear. They're not going to say, they're going to know that they're going to be provided for through God, through divine source, whatever. Um, as long as they're standing up for the truth and integrity, and they don't give in out of fear and comply to those who are trying to control everything and being dominating. So that's where we're at. That's this month's video. Again, these are just a piece of these insights. I write these insights like almost a year and a half in advance, a year to a year and a half in advance. So this information has all come forward, and now I'm just sharing it with you so you can have that foresight to work with. But if you'd like the full information, all the full details on things, what's happening in our years, our months, our days, our weeks, all of these different components, go over and pick yourself up a copy of the Code Journey. It's on my website, compassioncodes.com. You go to the Goods tab, click on Code Journey. There's an ebook version. It's a huge book. A lot of people like the paperback. 2025 will be getting released August 17th, so it will be available for you, and you'll be able to pick that up. But it is so great to have it, to be alert of these types of things, to understand when you can have the greatest impact in your community, in your world, and your life, and with people. And it's a great personal journey. Work. It's not predictive, but it does share with you what the currents are so that you can operate with wisdom, so you can keep standing with God, so you can be aware of when these distortions are coming up, when these tactics and these plays are being made that are going to be, you know, something to pay attention to. So that covers it. That's what we've got going down for August 2024. And I will catch you next month and catch up with you to share with you what's going to come down in September. But until then, stay safe, stay strong, hold your light in the world, and never be afraid to do the right thing, be in truth, be in kindness, and just work with unconditional love and stand up for what's right. Take care, everybody. See you soon.